Polk County Commissioner, and I am the chair. And I need to have board member check-in.
Mark Groutman's here.
Thank you.
Dan Joyce is here.
Thank you.
Margaret Magruder is here.
Thank you.
Wes Davies is here.
Thank you.
Chris Benjamin is here.
Thank you. Okay. Well, that's definitely a quorum. Thank you so much. All right, so we are ready to move on to our OWEB update.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Stephanie Page, and I'm the Deputy Director at the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, or OWEB. I'm going to show my screen here and walk through some slides. Some of this will be familiar to the folks who were on last year, but I don't know. I always appreciate a review, so figured I would kind of include a mix of material I covered last year as well as some updates. So please feel free to pipe up at any time during the presentation if you have questions. So I am now going to share my screen. And does that look like the full slide view to everybody? Okay, great. Just get my mouse over onto the right screen. And there we go. Okay. Great. So just for anyone who's watching today who is not familiar with OWEB, we are a grant making agency, and we administer a variety of different funding sources for grants that support watershed health around the state. Originally, back in the 1990s, OWEB was created to help support Oregon's salmon recovery goals, but over time, we've become, I would say, more and more inclusive in the types of watershed projects that we support, and we really work ridgetop to ridgetop in terms of where our funding goes and the impact of the grant funding that OWEB administers. This slide shows both folks who are eligible for OWEB grants as well as other super important partners that we work closely with. So the state's approach to watershed health, as you all know, is to rely on partnerships to achieve watershed health goals. So we work closely with a lot of different local organizations and many of the same organizations that the state weed board does. So the groups listed on the left side of this slide are the organizations that are directly eligible for OWEB grants. Uh-oh, I'm hearing an echo.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. No problem. Get it muted. All right. Okay. So, and then the groups on the right are other folks who are not directly eligible themselves, but are really common and important partners to many OWEB funded projects. I wanted to mention specifically that we work closely with the Oregon Department of Agriculture in several different ways. So OWEB administers several different grant programs together with ODA, including the noxious weed grants. We also partner to administer Soil and Water Conservation District capacity grants and other ag water quality funding. ODA staff are part of our technical review teams that are in several of the different regions of the state. And then we also loop ODA experts into some of the statewide technical review teams that we have for different grant programs. We've got a representative from the Board of Agriculture on the OWEB board, Barbara Boyer, and we also have representatives on the Oregon Ag Heritage Commission, which is another program that we administer that are recommended by ODA. So just lots of different ways that we collaborate. This slide shows a little bit of the history of the funding that has come to OWEB for grant programs over time. So I think just to summarize, traditionally we administered mainly lottery funds and some federal salmon recovery funds, and our funding sources have diversified over time. So we have had quite a few new programs come to us in the last 5 years. Another thing I wanted to call out on here is ballot measure 76. I'll talk about this more in the upcoming couple of slides, but that is the voter approved measure that directs lottery funding for parks and salmon and watershed work in the state. So half of the funding allocated in ballot measure 76 goes to parks for parks, for recreation and so forth. And then the other half comes to OWEB for grants and then to 5 state agencies for operations, and it supports watershed related work. And so the lottery grant funds that come to OWEB are what pay for the noxious weed grants that OWEB and the weed board administer together. So the Oregon Constitution, which is where ballot measure 76 is codified after it was passed, the Oregon Constitution and then Oregon statute provide the sideboards on how those lottery grant funds that OWEB administers can be spent. The grants have to be spent on projects that protect or restore watershed health or protect and restore fish and wildlife habitat. And they can also be spent on activities that grantees need to do to accomplish those projects on the ground. So for example, they can be spent on community engagement that leads to on the ground projects. They can't be spent for general education or for education in schools, for example, but they can be spent on recruiting community members to host projects or participate in projects. And they can also be spent on things like project planning, project design, obtaining permits, those sorts of things, and assessment and monitoring. So this is something I added this year. I think this is a question that a common question that folks might have is, in OWEB's different grant programs, what are some of the things that we look at when we're evaluating grant applications? For most of our grant programs, we've got the evaluation criteria captured in administrative rules. So, and so here's just a few examples from our rules of some of the criteria we might look at. Does the project result in ecological and watershed benefits? And can the applicant kind of give us a sense of the magnitude of those benefits and how they might measure them? So that is an example. Does the project treat the underlying cause of the problem they're trying to solve rather than the symptoms of the underlying cause? Does the project have clearly stated objectives, and do the project activities seem likely to achieve those objectives? Does the project address watershed function or ecosystem processes? So those are just some examples of criteria that we look at in evaluating grants. And one thing I was going to mention for restoration projects, many of you are probably familiar with this, but out in the regions, the regional review team goes on site visits as part of their evaluation of restoration project applications. So the photo you see in the slide is of a technical review team that is out on a site visit for a project where we had received an application. Okay, so how does OWEB support, flip to the right notes page here, how do OWEB funds support weed control? At the top of the list of on this slide, we've got the noxious weed program, obviously provides strong support for noxious weed control, and that is one of the ways that OWEB supports noxious weeds. That's in our spending plan. We also have a lot of other grant programs that OWEB administers that local partners are applying for and receiving grants for on a regular basis. And so this slide lists some of those other types of programs where weed control might not be in the name of the grant program, but that it's definitely an eligible use of those grant funds. And so the projects funded through all of these different programs, including the Noxious Weed Grant Program, complement each other. So on the left, I've got a screenshot from a project that was part of a focused investment partnership. That's one of our grant programs. And we funded this project to support sage grouse habitat restoration. So the overall project supported control of noxious weeds, and those included yellow star thistle, white top, Scotch thistle, and rush skeleton weed. And this is a post-project monitoring photo that the grantee submitted to us. The right page here. So just some other examples of projects and a little bit more about what that weed support budget looks like. So on the left side of this slide, you see how much we budgeted for the noxious weed grant program specifically in the OWEB board's adopted 2025 to 2027 spending plan. So that 3.5 million is a little bit of an increase over the previous biennium. It was at 3.25 million. So we were able to, with the funding we had available to allocate, bump that up a little bit for 25 to 27. And then the photos you see on the left side of this slide, just more examples of weed projects supported with OWEB funds. These are from a project that we funded in 2013 for knotweed control, I think that was. Yeah, that's what it was. So the project took place over several years, and we received a final report for this project in 2020. That's another aspect of OWEB's grant making process is for restoration projects. We often ask for post-project monitoring and reports. And so that allows us to understand how the project is doing. Is it achieving its intended outcomes? And we really appreciate that. It is work for the grantees, but we really appreciate it. It's great to be able to show photos like what the applicant gathered or what the grantee gathered, and be able to describe the outcome of the project over the long term. Then on the right side of this slide, just a few more details. I've listed some of those grant programs again that support weed control, and we updated the statistics that I presented last year on how much did OWEB spend on projects that included a weed control component in 2025. So for 2025, that was 8 million. And it was a mix of projects that includes control of invasive weeds and then some projects that are 100% focused on invasive weed treatments. So for anyone who's comparing that with the statistics I presented last year it was 77 projects for a total of 14 million. And one thing I'll note is that we shifted the timing of one of our major grant programs, open solicitation. So we only had one application cycle in 2025 rather than our normal number of two cycles. So I think that probably affected that overall amount, and that is one reason you saw that drop. In both years, a number of those projects are small grants. So, and those are I think at the time they were available for up to $15,000, and that has since been increased in the current spending plan. Okay, so just a couple more examples of projects we've funded in the last few years with some other types of OWEB grants. These are both recently funded projects. So I've got the pre-treatment photos to show you today, and then eventually we'll have post-project photos as the grantees complete their projects. On the left is a pre-treatment photo taken as part of a project by the Morrow Soil and Water Conservation District. The focus of that project is treatment of invasive annual grasses. And then on the right is a pre-treatment photo of a project we awarded in 2023 to Curry Soil and Water Conservation District for riparian restoration that includes a gorse treatment component. So then that project will restore approximately 182 riparian acres, which is a lot. So pretty impressive size of project there. So this is just a slide showing you how OWEB's grant funds are divided up in different categories. So for the lottery dollars and the federal salmon recovery dollars that OWEB administers, the OWEB board decides how those get divided up. That's kind of unique in state government, I think. Normally, we think of the legislature as making those kinds of decisions, but that is specified in the Constitution and in statute that an agency will do that. And so that responsibility is the OWEB board. They do that for the lottery and the federal salmon recovery funds that we administer. We also receive some funds from the legislature or from federal agencies that are specifically dedicated to a certain program, like the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program. We also administer Bureau of Land Management Good Neighbor Authority grants. So we have some other funds that we're passing through and administering through the agency. So these are the pie chart that you see are the funds that the board has the authority to divvy up and decide how those are allocated. So in terms of where the weed grants are located, the noxious weed grants within that pie chart, that's 3.5 million within that restoration category. And so just wanted to reiterate again, that is the category where it lives, and then many other projects that have a noxious weed control benefit are funded through that piece of the pie as well. So that's just a little bit of a review of OWEB funding and some things that happened in 2025, some projects that are going on. Just a few other updates that I thought might be of interest to you. I know many of you are closely connected with soil and water districts or watershed councils, or you work for a district or a council. And I wanted to mention that OWEB administers capacity grants for watershed councils and districts, and OWEB and ODA work together to administer the district capacity grants. It's been over 10 years since OWEB last did rulemaking on council capacity grants, and it's time to update the rules. So this is something we've been wanting to do for a while. And we're doing a series of listening sessions before we start the rulemaking. So we had a kickoff webinar last week just to describe the process and the tentative schedule. And then we're going to be having a series of virtual and in-person listening sessions over the next few months, and also doing a presentation at the Connect conference, or the Connect Plus conference, excuse me. So that is one update I wanted to share. I also wanted to mention regarding the Focused Investment Partnership Grant Program. The OWEB board updated the ecological priorities in that program. And now that that process is done, OWEB will be opening an application opportunity pretty soon for new partnerships. So those are high functioning groups of partners that want to make strategic progress on one of those board identified priorities. And that is a once in a biennium application opportunity. It's a pretty unique program. So that's a little bit of an update on FIP. And then OWEB received a new responsibility in 2024. We are now the administrator of a settlement fund, a settlement between the state of Oregon and Monsanto over PCBs, an environmental contaminant. And the settlement fund is called the Oregon Environmental Restoration Fund. We work with a council to oversee the stewardship of that fund, and the council, separate from the OWEB board, they provide policy direction on that fund. So that's the responsibility of the council. The fund is set up like an endowment, and an interest and earnings get distributed into 3 different buckets. And you see those buckets listed on the slide: the Tribal Nations Fund, the State Agency Program Fund, and the Impacted Community Fund. The members of the council have been appointed. The council has started to meet. So they've had a few meetings since last fall when they began. The first area of focus for the council has been the tribal nations distributions. And then an area of focus for the council this year is going to be engaging agencies on that state agency program fund. So we'll be reaching out to agencies regarding that fund. And then final update on this slide is that Governor Kotek issued an executive order on climate resiliency last year. And one thing the executive order does is it tasks OWEB and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife with leading an interagency team to identify climate resiliency attributes to help the agencies collectively track resiliency over time and help us have a common vision for what resiliency looks like in the state. So that's, we've been hard at work on that and planning the agency and external partner engagement. So we are hoping to have version 1.0 of the attributes done by the end of June of this year. So those are a few OWEB updates, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anybody got questions? You can speak up or use the raise your hand feature.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate the
Oh,
presentation.
There's one.
Oh.
There's one.
I know. Sorry, I was a little late on the click. I know one of the overarching themes here is that there is a lot of great noxious weed work being done outside of our grants, but how much conversation and this may be something that you and Troy have already talked about the methods that are being used in all that weed control, that is it maybe not in consultation with our staff and might not be the best, most current knowledge, chemistry, whatever. Is there any thought to that, or has there been any conversation around that? I know obviously we wouldn't have the capacity to look at every grant and say, yeah, that's the great way to do the noxious weed part of your project, but it also seems like there could be some missed opportunities there for the most effective methods.
Yeah, I think Troy and I have had a little bit of conversation about that. And yeah, Troy, if there's anything you want to add before I give my thoughts, go for it.
Well, I think, we've made some progress in that regard to just continue to try to collaborate and integrate. We've had weed staff on FIP review panels recently, right? Who were able to look at those projects. I definitely would say we're willing to engage, if there's a need for subject matter expertise in the review process of any of the other grant programs. I also know that there's a lot of really smart and capable ecologists and restoration practitioners out there. We're not the only ones who know how to kill weeds. I would say that if you or your staff or the panels ever feel like that the process could be more robust by incorporating someone or multiple people from our staff to assist with that, we would just say to you that we are open and willing to assist whenever that's needed, but also respect all the expertise that OWEB draws on from across the state as well.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Troy. Yeah, I think that's been great having staff participate on the FIP review team. So that we really appreciated that. And I'll mention, I think we've got our regional review teams and technical review teams are generally a mix of folks from state and federal agencies, as well as tribal government staff that have kind of a variety of different backgrounds. So I think we do try to have some expertise in weed control and just kind of ecosystem management and weed control as a part of those. But I think one other pathway that we've talked about is for the regional review teams, that some of the ag water quality staff sit on those from ODA. So I think just encouraging that staff to staff contact among the ODA sections could be a great way to provide that input too. So usually we have one representative per agency on the regional review teams, and folks try to coordinate within whatever organization they represent if there's a project that they themselves might not have the subject matter expertise on.
Thanks for that discussion and conversation. It was
Thanks
helpful.
for the question.
Okay, once again, thank you. Appreciate the presentation. We need to move along.
Thanks, Stephanie. See you in a couple weeks.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Of course, anytime.
Okay. Next up is our regional opportunities for board engagement. And I got Mark Porter's name on this and Carrie Barasco's name on this.
Yeah, hello. And I will try and find the right buttons here to share my screen and my presentation. Are y'all seeing me okay? Or are you seeing my slides okay, actually?
Yeah, it looks like you already
Yes.
advanced one. There you go.
I'm back. Okay. Well, great. I really appreciate the opportunity today to talk to the board and from people all around the state about our Rangeland Health Initiative, if you'd like to call it that, regarding invasive annual grasses in our rangelands and our Department of Ag program. So I'm Mark Porter. I was Northeast Oregon regional weed person until Shonda took over, and now I'm doing annual grasses across Eastern Oregon. So yeah, this year has provided me, I started last December in the new role, and it has provided me a wonderful opportunity to tour Oregon's rangelands from Malheur County to Morrow County to Lake County and Crook County and Grant County and all sorts of places in between. And the amazing conditioned grounds out there. We have some really good rangelands, which is wonderful. And also I've been able to meet the people who care for those grounds and make their livings off of those grounds. And that's been a real pleasure and an honor. So I'm really happy to be in this job and see lots of opportunities here. So I want to talk a little bit about invasive annual grasses, and I use this slide too often, but in our weed program, I would often find myself wandering through acres of annual grasses to get to a thistle patch. Now, this is an A-listed thistle patch, of course, and well worth doing, and I support this work thoroughly and wholeheartedly. But I also came to realize over time that we might need to change a little bit and think a little different. The reason we didn't engage with much of the annual grasses was largely the scope of the problem. But if we didn't change our tune, sometime we're going to miss the train on being able to deal with them at all. So annual grasses become the big picture. We are losing in the sagebrush biome in the West, we're losing about 1.3 million acres a year, largely to invasive annual grasses and fire and that cycle that perpetuates itself. How do they do it? Well, invasive annual grasses, for quick basic review, are early germinators and fast growers. They outcompete our native perennial grass seedlings. Importantly, these days, we also understand that they are robbing our mature perennial plants in our native systems of moisture, putting them into a drought stress mode. So this, when we convert annual or grasslands to annual forage, we reduce that forage volume and the consistency of it. We decrease that time the forage is available. We increase particularly fire risk. And once we have a fire, we increase annual grasses, and annual grasses increase the risk of fire, and it feeds itself. So we have larger fires and more severe. We also lose soil capacities, and I'll talk more about that as we go, and increased risk of other weeds, of course. I was able to visit Central Oregon this year with Dan Sun after talking to many partners in Jefferson and Deschutes County here near the Flat Fire. And this is kind of the condition of the ground on one side of the road that we wandered and looked through, a place where we'd been treating invasive annual grasses, as you see there. This is largely cheat, a little Medusa head, filling in the interspaces between plants, but also looking at the large fuel load of juniper invasion, probably pushing somewhere between stage 2 and 3. You Central Oregoners can tell that better than me, but and what happened across the road in a very similar site, this is not a before and after picture, but it could very well be, was the Flat Fire. And that's a sobering picture. And it, of course, wasn't a uniform fire. There was some mosaic, but much of the area looked like this. And this is the cycle where we have fuels from annual grasses and juniper encroachment feed the fires, and we end up with very detrimental impacts. The bunch grasses, in a mosaic fire, in a light fire, you see our poke test happening on the left. After they've burnt, you can still poke your finger in and you can feel that healthy root crown, and that plant will resprout and likely be very much okay. On the right, in a more severe fire, due to fuel loads, you would be able to punch your finger right into the ground an inch or two, and you know that that plant did not survive the fire. And we see this happening at large scales. On the left, you see uninvaded and unburned sagebrush community. If that burns, and it burns in a natural light way without invasive annual grass fuels or presence, it will end up being in perennial grassland. The sagebrush component will come back after many years. But if it is invaded, we see conversion, we see faster fires and more presence of annual grasses. And on the right, eventually, the bottom of the barrel is where we invasive annual grass dominated rangelands, and this is the danger. We also know that this is a conversion to annual grasses from perennial systems that results in 50% ecosystem carbon loss right out of the ground. And that's equivalent over annually to about 1% of all the carbon in that biome. So that's a steady, permanent attrition that we see of carbon resources as well. And all those pictures that I've showed you so far are primarily cheatgrass. This is our Oregon State Weed Board policy adopted around a decade ago about cheatgrass. And of course, on the right, I used a little extreme picture from suburban Boise, setting us up for a fire response and a degraded system. But our cheatgrass paper recognizes, and whoops, whoa, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry, we're going to go backwards. Don't look. Whew. Okay, there we are. Wrong button. So here we go. We have, this is our highlighted section, which is a little foggy, I'm sure, for you. But while not completely without forage value, it has good forage value. Invasion by cheatgrass following fire, overgrazing, and juniper encroachment changes moisture regimes and can seriously alter carrying capacity for livestock, eliminate and obstruct growth of food and shelter plants for wildlife, increase erosion, and the intensity and frequency of wildfire. And this is an immediate concern also for critical habitats of sage grouse, right? So that's a lot of economic stuff, but we chose at the bottom paragraph, which I didn't highlight, not to list it because of its wide distribution and some early grazing benefit for wildlife and livestock. This is a bit of a quandary when we are trying to grow a program that deals with invasive annual grasses at scale. As public applicators, we are not legally allowed to cheat non-listed plants. And it is really probably the most impactful plant in Eastern Oregon and maybe the arid West. And at the moment, we really can't fund it. We can recognize it, but we're not able to directly engage. Years ago, I had a conversation with Steve Grasty, the judge from Harney County, who was on the weed board in the early teens of 2000. And I said, hey, would you be willing to come back to the weed board, Steve? We're looking for members. And he said, oh, I wouldn't be on a weed board that wouldn't list cheatgrass as a weed. And that kind of made me stop and think hard. And I understand the reasons for our policy, but I also see the quandary created when we don't list a very impactful plant. The next thing I want to talk about, and we'll come back to cheat, I guess, is the idea that in our rangelands today, we have the opportunity to be able to look at them at scope and scale. We've never seen them before. We can use data generated in huge databases from satellite imagery over time and see the change in condition of our grasslands. You can see red is invaded annual grasses, poor condition, green is good condition, shrublands, light green, intermediate, blue is good condition, grasslands. It's kind of hard to look at that scale. But by the way, the dot here, I think hopefully you can see my cursor. On the right-hand side of the map is where that picture was taken of true prevention happening. Thank you, Beth and company, for boot brushes down out of Durkee on our weed board tour last year. We zoom in a little closer and the maps are a little better. But that's same dot, and we're looking at these multiple range conditions. Well, this map was developed in the sagebrush steppe, and it works to talk about, at big scales, it works to talk about range condition and how it's changing over time. But it doesn't apply well, easily, outside of the sagebrush biome, and it also doesn't continue, it doesn't connect to fuels or fire. So we put together a large group, 19 partners, ODA, Sustainable Northwest, Oregon State University at the Cascades campus, Dr. Toby Maxwell, Oregon State University Extension folks, Jefferson and Gillum County, SWCDs, ODFW, USDA, ARS, Nature Conservancy, some private ranches to look at how to make this model more useful to us at the state level. Put in an application, a grant application to the Allen Family Philanthropy group. We did not get that, but we are going to continue to move forward because this gives us a framework to analyze and talk about, communicate rangeland health. So lots of big pieces going on to try and manage this at the scale. And we know, of course, as we talked about the ecological function, but we also know range in Oregon is critical to our ag industry. Beef is the #2 ag commodity. Throw in a little hay ground, which often goes with beef production, and you're looking at a very big part of Oregon's ag economy. So this is a big deal, and public-private land is huge in that nexus as well. And we know that our native perennial rangelands are the best. They're the best forage base, they're the best fire retardant, they're the best wildlife habitat, they're the best nutrient water cyclers and carbon protectors. And we know we're going to work in terms of our management, our grazing management, fire and recreation, with our timing intensity to do the best management we can. No matter what we do, we have to have that as a critical ingredient to our activities. And so as we look at not just a weed problem, but a systematic problem, a large problem that we have not tried to deal with at scope and scale to date, we propose that we look at focusing on things we want and not just what we don't want. We look at big problem, at the big picture and the underlying causes. We work across fence lines, of course. That's an easy one for us. And we promote efficiency and effectiveness with these programs by helping people do the technical work needed to defend and grow the cores of our perennial grasslands. To this end, we got the 5-year partnership with the NRCS. I started a year ago and so on. That's the basis for our work, but we also match that dollars with state dollars from the Natural Working Lands Funds. As Stephanie talked about a moment ago, we hope to add from funds to this effort, right, for lots of good work that needs to be done to help us continue with giving technical assistance and strategic planning, because one of the things in there is a 20-year plan and 10-year goals for Idaho and Washington. And I'm curious where and how we're going to move forward with that, but we can look at some examples. By the way, we're excited to be hiring a second rangeland health specialist here soon. The job announcement should come out. So anyone interested, keep your eyes on our web pages and emails from Tristan. So our neighbors, Idaho and Washington, are also working and maybe a step ahead of us to get to programs that they can impact rangeland health, recognizing its significance. The Idaho Grazing Improvement Program is based on Utah's program, which I just learned this morning, so I don't have anything about Utah's program. But Idaho passed a House bill which funded, which gave them capacity to develop projects, their range staff, develop projects, implement projects, and monitor these things to improve grazing activities across Idaho and lands. Water, traditional fencing, virtual fencing, weed control, predator control, so on like that are available. Washington, I do want to add that Idaho didn't fund that program through allocation through the legislature. But they are currently working with the Western Landowners Alliance, a nonprofit dedicated to similar types of things as we've been talking about, rangeland health and community health. And they are bringing the dollars to put out the grants that are available through this program, but Idaho is providing technical capacity. So there's more than one way to skin a cat. But the Washington program, they wrote a plan. Their Shrub Step Restoration and Resiliency Initiative, as you see here in 2022 or 2024, was funded through the legislature for a $2.3 million initial biennial funding, and then $1 million a year allocated each biennium. They are hopeful they continue to get that and might look to grow that fund. But anyway, we have some inspiration from our neighbors to look at to decide how to continue to be catalysts across this state, to make connections, improve rangeland health, share our learning, and uplift Oregon rangelands, not just in the sagebrush steppe, but statewide. And we're meeting with all sorts of people, SageCon folks, the Board of Agriculture. We had a Northeast Oregon Range Summit last year, and we'll do again this year. Conservation districts, LITs. We have field consultations in 9 counties this last year. First Foods Research with the Eastern Oregon Ag Research Station, and the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla. We endangered plant work, test plots, lots of work going on that we want to continue and expand. And really, I bring this back because it's at the crux of what we're doing in the field. We're reclaiming bare ground. So the treatment that you, or the picture you see on the left is a treatment in the foreground and untreated in the background. You can see there's more bare ground here. That's an herbicide that's active on the invasive annual grasses, giving room for those perennials to breathe. Same on the right-hand side, you can see treated and untreated, and an example of really nice sagebrush country perennial grass community represented there in the center. And I want to point out that even though that is bare ground, it isn't unoccupied. Just because we can't see it doesn't mean something is there. Those are roots of Sandberg's bluegrass in that picture that cover that ground underneath, and those roots need water to function. And that's where the invasive annual grasses fill in. When we give that breathing room to our perennial plant communities, we see change. And this picture is from the Rail Ridge Fire in southern Grant County. In the background, you can see the burnt juniper. In the foreground, in 2022, 2 years before the fire, the juniper was cut and treated, but then also it was treated with Rejuvra, and the annual grass load was reduced and removed, and this was the result. Much different outcome. We can bring communities together to do this work with our integrated tools for positive outcomes. It's a big, big job, but we got to go big or go home. We are home, I say, so let's go big is my thought. We need clarity on our policies. We need state leadership to facilitate implementation, and we need funding that's consistent and commensurate with the work at hand. And while I know those are all challenges, I think we are up to it. Questions and thoughts from the group? Thank you.
Hey, Mark,
Sure,
Craig
Phil.
here.
Oh, here you go.
I know you have it in there, but I just didn't grasp all of it. Is fire a tool at all in your, in your spectrum of things that you expect to do? Again, as an ex-grass seed grower, for the first 30 years of my life, it was considered a major tool. I still think it is, in grass seed production, but I also understand the limitations or the problems that are caused by fire across the rangeland. And again, you taught me well about Medusa Head in the very beginning of my tenure here, and how rampant it can be after a fire. But I'm very curious about, how that tool can be used if it's something that you all think is appropriate in certain cases.
Yeah, Craig, excellent question, and a challenging question because fire is loaded with fear these days, right?
Right.
We've seen 1.9 million acres burned in Oregon in 2024. 25 was kinder to us, but we're looking potentially at a high fuel load and maybe dry conditions this year. So, but in the right scenario, Craig, it's an excellent tool for managing fuels on site, both fine and heavier. I wouldn't be able to speak well to the juniper, forest management, but I do think it's a tool. I think there are some folks working with it. I have a slide from and did a test plot down in Lake County where they had done some prescription fire, and we treated one side burnt and unburnt to kind of compare how the dynamics work out. So yeah, they're trying to put fire back in the landscape in places in rangelands in Oregon, but I think it's a smaller subset of people just because of the fear of letting that thing get out of hand once or twice, But yeah.
Mark, real quick, can you unshare your screen, please?
Oh, sorry. Oh, well, there it is. Gotcha.
Thank you.
Got a little better.
So let's let Sierra get in here, and then I want to get something in chair, but I see a hand up out there. Sierra Dawson. Sierra, we see your hand up. If you're talking right now, you are muted on our end.
Sierra,
So
can you
sorry.
unmute? Oh, there she
Yeah.
goes.
I didn't mean to actually have my hand up. I don't have a question. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Chair Pope, members of the board, one of the reasons we kind of put this newer section into the agenda here is because we feel like there's certain things here where there's opportunities for board engagement. And also, if you're not speaking, please mute your microphones. Thank you. Not only are there opportunities for us to kind of work internally as a board and as a staff to maybe reevaluate policies like our cheatgrass policy, to consider new listings, whether it's on a B list or the conversation we have hinted at multiple times about the potential for a C list that may come with less regulatory enforcement, but still recognize certain species. But then beyond that, interactions with, as you know, our limitations when it comes to advocations, especially for funding that's legislatively appropriated, wanting to make sure we bring kind of the issues and the challenges here to the board so that you're aware of them and then hopefully can identify opportunities to engage and advocate for that type of support on behalf of the larger community. So.
Any other questions or comments? We'll move on to
Mr.
Carrie otherwise.
Mr. Chair, this is Margaret, and I think that this presents us with another challenge. Certainly, I just want to run out there and get rid of cheatgrass and change things and get a snowpack so we don't have to deal with the drought that is going to encourage all that too. So I think this is something we really need to talk about. And of course, we need your guidance as to what the most effective methods would be to move forward. Funding is always an issue with all of our agricultural or issues. People don't seem to want to fund those things. They've got many other things to fund. So I think that we need to continue this conversation certainly and provide you folks with some direction. Thank you for that report and the passion that goes with it, Mark.
Okay, Carrie, are you ready to go?
I am. All right, with confirmation you can see my screen, I will start speaking.
Okay, and just a reminder, now we're approaching 10 o'clock and we're that much behind on our agenda. So every bit any of you can do to help us stay on time will be helpful. Bye.
Can you confirm you can see the screen?
I see it.
Wonderful. Okay, I am presenting this morning, Carrie Perosco down in the southwest corner of the state. And I would like to, for new board members in particular, or even a refresher for board members that have been on the board for a number of years, ways in which you have assisted us in the past and continue to assist us at ODA and our invasive noxious weed work that we do. I'll be addressing 4 areas: state listings, our grant program allocations of dollars to partners across the state, letters of support, and then approaching, looking towards the future, ways that the board in even larger ways could help support us. Of course, number one, the Oregon State Weed Board does each and every meeting is to listen to risk assessments and proposals from staff in terms of listings to our state noxious weed list. I just would like to point out one example. In 2005, there were reports of an invasive mustard, yellow tuft alyssum, down in my area that were beginning to escape. And by 2009, enough information had been gathered, presentation had been made to the board, and the board decided in 2009 to list alyssum as an A-rated noxious weed. If at that time, this plant was spreading very quickly, escaping originally planted fields. You'll see that in the photo here. The company that came in planting this thinking they were going to make a lot of money, distilling it down to nickel extracted out of the soils from this plant, thought they'd make lots of money, planted it throughout a wide scoped area in Josephine County. And at that time, we had treatments in excess of 70 plus net acres of this scattered. If the board had not made that listing in 2009, I can guarantee you today that plant would be widespread not only across ag fields, but it got into the waterways, along roadways. It would be on every cobble bar of the Illinois River Valley, Illinois River and tributaries, as well as the roadways. It's just that aggressive. Happy to report, again, the board took action, listed this. ODA with partners went into action, and just last year, this whole project area has only had 3,268 plants, if you can believe it. This field here was hundreds of thousands of plants, and only 14 were found last year. So that's the power of having a very strong noxious weed listing process and an eradication program to back it up. So thank you for that continued service in helping us list threats to our state. Another way in which the board over the years has been able to assist ODA and our partners on the noxious invasive weed front is through timely letters of support. This is an example from my area. About 8 years ago, we were having some pushback from U.S. Forest Service down on the Umpqua National Forest with being able to use herbicides for one of our A-listed aquatic noxious weeds, yellow floating heart. The board provided a letter. It helped move the needle in terms of getting support for the forest to actually pursue a site-specific EA. There was fear that the public would not allow herbicides in water. That ended up not being the case. The EA was put together very thoughtfully, and it was well supported and allowed ODA to get in and use our best tool in our toolbox for aquatic invasives like yellow floating heart. So that letter was very much helped ODA and our partners in that area get an A-rated weed treated. So that letter was very effective. More recently, a letter of support that Chairman Craig Pope just signed a week and a half ago and was presented to the City Council in Bandon last Monday by Troy in support of a strong city ordinance specifically focused on gorse control. This is the only city ordinance I know of in all of Oregon focused on a single species that actually has teeth and is very, very effective in terms of trying to tackle gorse, one of our epicenters, historic epicenters of this very flammable, invasive, noxious weed. I'm happy to report, as we were meeting yesterday, the city abandoned vegetation management coordinator that oversees this program was able to work with his planning department head and further get support from the county, Coos County. Two of the commissioners voted to expand the ordinance beyond the city of Bandon and to lands in a strategic fashion in other parts of Coos County. So again, another timely letter. This program was being threatened locally, of being watered down, so to speak, in terms of losing some of its teeth with the citation authority and abatement authority. And partners rallied, including this letter from the State Weed Board, to help course correct that potential slide back into a less effective ordinance. So thank you. That letter was very well, in a timely fashion, able to make a big difference on the South Coast. Coming to you in the near future, maybe, Oregon Department of Agriculture has both A and B rated weeds at 2 South Coast airports. It's on Oregon Department of Aviation lands. That's the other ODA. We have 2 airports, Cape Blanco and Bandon, where we have gorse, a B listed noxious weed, and then we have matgrass, an A listed noxious weed. We've had an up and down relationship or success with getting support from Department of Aviation for these important projects. And we might be coming to you again in form of letter of support, perhaps. Troy and I will be working, reaching out to Department of Aviation, initiating dialogue again in the importance of our A-listed and B-listed noxious weeds and collaboration we need from all partners. So our agency is collaborating with state parks on this project in terms of controlling the mat grass on trails and networks out to the ocean. But the mat grass that is actually along this runway you see in this photo is on state aviation lands, and that's where we're not seeing the support we need. It's partly due to the State Department of Aviation has 28 airports across the state, very limited staff to do all vegetation management per their directives of FAA regulations for line of sight and safety concerns with aircraft coming in and out. So again, Troy and I will be approaching Department of Aviation, initiating dialogues, but we know we can count on you for a letter support or other support if we meet any resistance. Lastly, I wanted to bring up a bigger ticket item, I guess you'd say, of support from the board, more of a long-term vision. How can we build a stronger invasive weed OSU extension connection between the invasive noxious weed folks in the state weed board, and our OSU, on campus in Corvallis and satellite campus, as well as their extension agents across the state. With this, I'd say, what is possible? I know there's a lot more connections that can be made because I lived in it in California. I came from a very strong program with UC Cooperative Extension, the universities, colleges, extension offices. It was tremendous, the amount of research and collaboration that was going on across the state with many of our big questions we had about invasive noxious weeds. There were joint field projects across the state addressing some of our timely questions, and the questions change throughout the years, of course, as we have new invasives that threaten, as well as we have new tools that come on the scene as to help us in the management aspect. An example, in the 90s, some of the research I participated in was some basic questions at the time we didn't know about yellow star thistle control. What's the best timing for mowing? Is prescribed burning an effective tool? Well, we set out with our university agents, extension agents across different counties in California, and set out plots. We set out trials and got the answers to these questions. And now that research is standard for what is done in these 2 areas of yellow star thistle management. We have questions, not just about yellow star thistle. I could have gone on and on about questions. I know my colleagues and my partners, we have often out in the field working, we have lots of questions about control and tools. For instance, blackberry and knotweed. We know it erodes the banks, but we don't have clear research that helps us support that. Aquatic invasive impacts to water quality. We have some preliminary studies that have been done on the Willamette, but we need more. How are the native plant communities shifting as we take those invasives out of the water column? So many questions just around aquatics. Seed bank longevity. So many of our weeds that we work on are on our noxious weed list because they have long seed bank life. Some of the species I work on, I don't know how long the seed bank lasts. And we can work with OSU to do greenhouse studies and other seed studies to help us look into those, getting some of those answers. Efficacy of late season treatments. We're getting longer seasons we're treating, and I do have questions myself about some of our late season treatments and how effective they are. It'd be nice to collaborate with OSU and Extension to start looking at some of our late season efficacy of our treatments. We often have new tools, new herbicides. Vastland, for instance, was a new one a few years ago. We didn't have any answers of if it was going to perform better than Garlon 3A or Garlon 4 in our coastal settings. The research hadn't been done there. That's just one example. Okay, where do we begin? What might this look like in terms of moving forward with board support and engagement? We probably need to look at what's been done in the past. I know Tim Butler, program manager for so many years, used to talk about different professors on the OSU campus that were engaged in more direct way with the Oregon State Weed Board and noxious weed work. So we do have a little bit of a history to look to. What's possible? What are surrounding states doing? What's Idaho doing? What's Washington doing? How is their extension service, their university connections with their noxious invasive weed work? How is it different? We can look to them as models. A little bit of homework. Which professors, extension agents are currently engaging in invasive weed adjacent projects? I don't think there's much direct work going on, but if you're working in a wetland, if you're looking in a rangeland, if you're working in different systems, these questions overlap with some of the questions they're already looking at in the research they have currently underway. Some recent collaborations, one on the South Coast, we have engagement from Scott Levengood. He's with the College of Forestry, their Oregon Wood Innovation Center. He's jumped on board with the Gorse Action Group, and he is actually making panels of gorse stems and branches, the woody material, into plyboard and also into decorative tabletops. He brought a table that he and his students built in their labs, a gorgeous piece of furniture that he's exploring markets for small businesses that could set up shop on the South Coast and actually make use of all this gorse material that we're removing. That's been a very exciting development with our collaboration with OSU. I know Bonnie and the department over on the east side with Palmer's Amaranth has had collaboration with Joel Felix, a big, strong connection with OSU there. But we know it can be so much more. First steps, might we invite OSU to our Oregon State Weed Board meetings? Some personal invites to some key folks and key departments, both extension and on campus folks. Field tours, let's invite them to our field tours. It was great having Joel on the Palmer's Amaranth piece of our tour, but it would have been nice for him to go on other pieces of our tour as well. We have a big opportunity coming up this coming December as it's time to have our every other year symposium in Corvallis. This might be an opportunity to engage better with OSU folks right there on campus to come see what we're doing, participate in our symposium. Engagement inquiry letters, perhaps out to some of the key natural resource related departments on campus. Maybe the board would like to nominate an OSU type liaison, type connector person, or a small board committee. Maybe we could work towards a joint OSU Weed Board meeting, meeting of the minds, brainstorming session. There are lots of paths forward. I don't mean to suggest any particular direction forward, just some ideas that have been running through my mind as I think about this futuristic type assistance from the board. So in summary, the board has been instrumental in helping us at ODA and all our partners prioritizing weeds for listing in the state. And as you saw yesterday from all the presentations from staff, we're having a lot of wins out there because of our prioritized system in the state. You'll hear this afternoon a continued allocation of funds, the grant program to many, many partners across the state doing awesome work. Letters of support, a couple examples I gave, those are not exhaustive of letter support for emerging issues, time-sensitive matters. Your board letters really do make a difference. And then lastly, that bigger eye towards the future, that vision that I would love to see by the time I retire, which approaches sooner and sooner each year. I would love to see a strengthening of that relationship with our OSU and extension agents. And with that, I don't think we have time for discussion. I hope we have time for maybe 5 minutes, Chair, because this is something that's really important, our engagement as we move forward. Thank you.
I saw Chair Pope come back in. Multiple board members went out and back in. I'm not sure if there was some technical difficulties for them.
Something dropped us, made us all drop out here. Looks like Chris got a question.
I do. Thank you, Chair Pope. Thank you, Carrie, for your presentation. Also, Mark, thank you as well. More of a comment than a question, I think. To your prompt about building a stronger network statewide, I think that that is really timely. I'm also familiar with the extension networks in our other states, whether it's about weeds or just plant pests in general. Not to say ill things of OSU, but my opinion is that the OSU extension network is not as strong as what we see in some other states. So I just think that's worth acknowledging. They're suffering from funding. You know, every time a position gets defined, you know, someone retires, we're left wondering, is the university going to back up and replace that critical extension position? So it's one thing to keep in mind. I would definitely support, I think, a really good way, and I've seen this happen in other groups or other areas of subject matter, developing an interagency task force for weeds in particular. And that can include, like, I know you guys work with your partners, but this would be a more maybe technical working group to kind of share those expertise and what people are researching. You can invite those key professors, you know, appropriate members of the staff to have those standing meetings, which maybe are happening quarterly, as a suggestion, and utilize the IPM Center. We've had similar discussions on the insect pest side of things, reaching out to Sylvia Rondon, the director, and saying, you know, how do we tap into all of the different extension offices across the state to find out who the key people are, who are the professors, and are there ways for us to kind of utilize the IPM Center as a connecting point for that. And she seemed open to that, so I might suggest using that as an avenue as well.
Thank you, Chris. I would love to see a task force. I'm sure Troy would too. Would love your assistance in moving that forward. Yeah, OSU Extension in my area is more of an education. You know, they do a lot of education, which is fantastic, but they're so disconnected from what we do in the field and the actual realities of invasive pest management. It has limits what they can do, and I often see them giving misinformation, or they rely so heavily on us as partners. It's just there's a definite gap there that needs to be bridged, and I know it's possible. It's definitely possible. My vision is to have scores of graduate students doing 2 to 3 year master's programs on some of our questions. We provide the questions. You know, it is very possible to get some graduate students working on some of our most burning questions that we have out in the field.
Ryan.
I'll just say, yeah, absolutely. Funding is the biggest issue. We are resource limited. Positions have not been refilled, so that's a big issue. But I will say on a positive, I think you could reach out to John Lambrinos. He is a landscape ecologist here in the Department of Horticulture and an invasive plant specialist. So in our own work, we've consulted with John, and he's been our ecological advisor on that. So anyway, that's just one. And you know, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the work of the Institute for Applied Ecology, and Tom Kay is an adjunct or courtesy faculty in botany and plant pathology, who would be a really great resource to help make connections in that unit as well.
Thanks, Ryan, and welcome.
Okay,
So
board members.
Yeah, the board members that popped in and out, and in summary, I gave you guys a kudos for continuing to list species. It's effective. Letters of support have been very timely. We'll keep coming back to you for those maybe in the near future on a mat grass issue. We might be needing your help. And then lastly, hoping to make a stronger bridge to OSU Extension and OSU professors on our campuses, helping us answer some of our needed questions for invasive noxious weed work across the state.
All right. Thanks, Carrie. Ryan, we're going to move on to you next. Keep in mind that I do have a 10:30 timeline I have to do for public comment, so I may interrupt you for that. So jump in.
Great. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come speak with the Weed Board. I'm glad to see Director Benneman and Kevin Bailey from the ODA here to help make sure I don't speak out of turn as far as process here. So very quick introduction. I'm a professor of horticulture at Oregon State University. Been here since 2009. And I am a woody tree and shrub breeder. And one of the big things that I work on is using various techniques to breed for low fertility forms of historically weedy or invasive nursery crops that remain economically important due to their ease of production, ease of culture, and resilience in landscapes. You know, the same things that make a good landscape plant make a good invader at times. So I sent previously, I sent an original summary, and I provided a list of specific cultivars that we, as the Butterfly Bush Cultivar Committee, which I think I have everyone on here. It's Kevin Bailey and Cara Mills from ODA, Josh Cady, Jeff Stone, myself, Tom Kay, and John Lambrino. So we have a mix of ODA, nursery industry, Oregon State University, and Institute for Applied Ecology are the constituents that make up the Butterfly Bush Cultivar Committee. So I sent that list that we plan to propose to Director Benneman based on 98% reduction in fertility relative to a fertile cultivar. So that was based on, if you look there, also attached in my summary was a 2024 Journal of Environmental Horticulture document. And so that shows how the cultivars were evaluated. It was done over 2 years. I think a really detailed study, and I have really strong confidence that it holds up. The findings are real. Importantly, I think what I want to do, a couple of things, is contextualize the basis for that 2% relative fertility. So I think I created probably some confusion around how that number was arrived at with some previous statements I made. And I'm admitting I'm not my study has not been in ecology over the last 25 years. It's horticulture. So, but I do have a better understanding now. I've been collaborating with these ecologists. And so we did do a really thorough review of the ecological literature, including levels of biocontrol required to reduce population growth of long-lived woody perennials. So there's a 2025 publication, I'll drop it in the chat. It's also in the Journal of Environmental Horticulture that reviews the literature on population growth and the necessary reductions in fertility to essentially eliminate or, to any reasonable threat of spread. So that manuscript, it was co-authored by ecologists, weed scientists, plant breeders. It's the basis that we're going to use to propose future cultivars be evaluated using there's a framework for cultivar evaluation. It talks about breeding methods, evaluation protocols, and some examples of sufficient reduction. So importantly, we clearly state that cultivar in that document, in that publication that I'll link in a moment, cultivars should be evaluated based on actual data. They need to have some field evaluation done, and not based on, approval's not going to be based on a survey instrument or a questionnaire that documents whether they have interspecific hybridization or ploidy manipulation or something else. We need to have actual data. So my original summary that I submitted was, I think, a little bit based on my misunderstanding of the whole process for cultivar evaluation, and that led me to propose some specific cultivars to the weed board. But my understanding is that the Butterfly Bush Committee will send recommendations directly to Director Benneman. But I'm here in the interest, we want to be working side by side with the weed board to make sure that this entity has confidence in how we're evaluating these cultivars that are being proposed. And in the future, we propose, again, providing summary information about the cultivar evaluations to the weed board to explain our recommended changes. So we can provide data on the proposed cultivars, when, where it was tested, the percent fecundity and relative fertility, and so forth. So that's my very quick summary. Maybe more valuable for us to answer some questions. I think there's 6 minutes before Chairman Pope needs to open for public comment. And I'll drop some links in here really quick. So the first one I just put in is the paper on development and land evaluation of landscape plant cultivars with reduced fertility. So that's the framework that we propose. And then the second one was the original publication that's specific to butterfly bush cultivars that we evaluated here in Corvallis over 2 years. Sounds like a classroom after I get done with a lecture.
I guess I'll chime in. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us today and for giving us the overview. I think this is a really important topic, but I also just want to broaden the discussion just a bit, if I may. Just to reiterate or emphasize a point that yes, we're using butterfly bush as a case study, but it is not the end of the discussion. It's really just the tipping point of a much larger discussion in how is the state going to approach handling these, for the lack of a better word, weedy ornamentals, or ones that have been determined to be weedy or perceived as weedy. How do we balance the interests of our robust nursery industry as well as the interests of the conservationist and native plant noxious weed community? Historically, butterfly bush, the state made a decision. I'll be honest, I don't really agree with that decision of how we approached it back in the day. Had I been the SPRO at the time, I probably would have maybe made a different decision, but here we are. I think it's messy. I don't really like the idea of having partial cultivars on approved lists. I think in terms of the regulatory framework and how we approach it, it makes it confusing. There's no national process for approving certain cultivars over others. And I think that may be the goal of getting that conversation going with this advisory group that we put together. But that's a long roadway before we have something that's happening on a national level. Because just for the record, I got other states calling me, asking me, what's the newest? What are you approving? How are you doing that? And I don't have a good answer for them. And I don't want to have an answer for them until there's a definitive process that's been fully vetted by a broad audience that everyone can agree on. And I don't think we're anywhere near there yet.
I would thank you, Chris. And I am actually really encouraged. HRI and American Hort are really on board with this. And so Jen Gray and Michael Martin have been reaching out to folks nationally to try to bring together a working group to literally do that. We don't want to have, and I've never been a proponent of having a one-size-fits-all national, policy on this, that, or the other cultivar, but we want to have a uniform discussion on how plants are evaluated and what the thresholds maybe should be. So I'm hoping, and if you're dying to be a part of that group, please, you can email me. I'll put my email in here, and I can help connect you with Jen Gray if you like.
I'm glad to hear that. I would also be interested how Jen or HRI is engaging with the National Plant Board and talking to the regulators about their perspectives of how that would work. Granted, this is all early days for sure, but at some point we would need to engage with the plant board on that.
Chris, I'd love for you to be a part of that working group on,
Another working group.
You got all the time in the world.
All the time. That's what I get for opening, saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing that we're about to get up against the public comment, I believe there is maybe an ask coming. Ryan, are you going to be able to stay and continue this conversation? And to the board, I don't see any reason why we won't finish early today. So I think we do have some extra time that will get caught up through the presentation of the grant recommendations. We've streamlined that process pretty well and have still blocked out a pretty large chunk of time for that process. So Ryan, will you be able to stay to continue this discussion after the public comment closes?
Yeah, I mean, I should. I have a bit of a heart out, but I have some time now.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I think we're pretty close here, so I'm going to go ahead and suspend our conversation with the professor for a few minutes here and ask if we have anyone who wishes to give public comment for anything that's maybe not on this agenda.
And Tristan, did you receive any sort of written comments or anything?
I have not.
Okay, thank you.
And there doesn't appear to be anything in the chat at this time.
Okay. I want to make sure to leave opportunity for if anybody's parked here waiting for their opportunity to speak to the board. All right. Well, we're going to move past the public comment portion since I hear or see nothing from anyone that's interested. And I guess if we have somebody who's dying to talk to the board about public policy, I guess we can fit that in if we need to. But there was your designated time. So Troy, Professor, we get back into it.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw it back to you, Ryan, because like I said, I did anticipate that there would be an ask here, maybe of the board. And so if there was, I think that would then initiate quite a bit of discussion. But I'm not clear on maybe your approach has changed given the recognition that although you want to work with the board hand in hand and explain any proposals you might make to the director, to Chris, that there's kind of two parallel, or separate kind of processes here. So if you had a specific request for the board, I think we might as well just go there.
Yeah, I guess because I'm not a lone actor here. So I'm acting in accordance, I think, as much as I can, and I'm intending to act on behalf of that committee. And I think there's interest in having a discussion on the merits of how we're evaluating these cultivars. I think is our bigger goal right now. And really want to get a sense of the concerns that the weed board might have about, the methods that we're using, how we're going about it, ground truthing the data, because, as Chris said, I think more than getting into any specifics, even on a genus, where we really want to make sure that there's confidence in the process. So is that I'm sorry. It really sounds like a classroom now. I just we really want to make sure that there's confidence in the process, and that we're all in agreement. So I guess in lieu of or instead of coming to say we would like your blessing on these cultivars to be removed from the list and these to be added, I think I really want to focus the conversation on the protocols, the methods and framework that we're using to evaluate, because it's going to be a larger discussion. And I think we could all get bogged down on this cultivar versus that, or even this genus versus that, but really, looking at the methods. And I know I just dropped a rather lengthy paper in the chat that no one's probably had a chance to even look at, much less digest. So yeah, I don't know if that means that I should come back again or what.
Maybe to facilitate that conversation, just a really high level point of clarity for the board. Right now, the current kind of mechanism and threshold is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is a question, is that a cultivar that's being evaluated and maybe eventually proposed to be given an exception would have to meet a 2% fertility rate, right? I guess I'd ask for clarification on how many times what's the standard right now for replication of those results? And then number two, is there any subsequent generation testing of those, of the 2% that are viable? Is there subsequent testing of those seeds and then any progeny that they would produce? How far down the line does the current protocol go?
Yeah. So to the first question, I think I remember them both. Yes, the current level is 2%. That was the first question, right? And we're looking at female fecundity. So how many seedlings? This is in the case of butterfly bush. We looked at the number of seedlings that the females produce under pretty optimal conditions. So they were germinated in a greenhouse after we collected the seeds and babied these things along. The next question was about replication. So again, the study that I did was replicated. We had 6 blocks of plants. So they were replicated 6 times in space, and they were replicated twice. So they were replicated over years, and we had no rank changes necessarily. I mean, there were some things that shifted around a little bit, but there weren't gross rank changes. And so, for instance, everything that had been previously approved fell on the same side of the line in both years. So stuff that was under 2% fertility was under 2% fertility both years of the study, and those that were over 2% were over 2% in both years of the study. So we saw consistency. And so the recommendation moving forward beyond butterfly bush, we went overboard with the evaluation here. The recommendation moving forward is for there to be replication in a study. So I'm considering one study. So we're at the Lewis Brown Hort Research Farm here in Corvallis. There would be replication at that site. So we would have 3 to 6 of each cultivar evaluated at that site. And that's one location year. So that's what I'm calling it. We would need to necessarily have it done at least twice is what we've proposed. So you could either do it in Corvallis at the Lewis Brown Hort Farm and at the North Willamette Research and Extension Farm in the same year at 2 different locations, or you could do it over time. So we could do it twice at the Lewis Brown Farm. But again, we're replicated within each study and then doing it at least twice. So either through time or space. Does that answer that part of it? I want to make sure I'm getting all the answers here.
In general, it does. I guess to follow up to that, is your process that you're using, is that a standardized, like in your study, sure, it was replicated, in space and in time. Is the protocol that you use standardized, or is it just that's just what you came up with?
That is in the document that we've proposed, which is what we are hoping that the industry and regulation nationwide moves to, so that we want to be able to provide guidance to breeders, to nurseries, to departments of agriculture and other regulators, other panels like this and boards, that yes, it is replicated in each study and then replicated either through time or space. And I keep using the word replication to mean 2 different things. Reps means not just a single plant in a single location in a single year. It's, to get one year of data, so one study necessarily has more than one replication. And so, yes, that is what we have proposed, is this standardized methodology that's in the Contreras et al. Paper from 2025 that I've linked. The other question is another important one about what happens. So there's under 2%. What happens in subsequent years? So that first paper on the butterfly bush cultivars, and well, I'll just start with, there's not been a ton of work done on this. And that's, yeah, there's a lot of reasons for that, but you know, expensive and time consuming and so forth. Mark Brand, I think, has done a little bit of work on this, and we included in table 5, we looked at the relative fecundity of these 34 cultivars originally. So that's what, whatever, the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4th column in that paper is the relative fecundity of that. Oh, sorry, the 5th column is the relative fertility of the actual cultivar. And then we looked at the relative fecundity of progeny that were collected from it. So a good example is honeycomb. You look at honeycomb and the relative fecundity of the cultivar is 1%. We then went to the next generation, and the relative fecundity of progeny that are open pollinated from honeycomb that we collected was 0. So I was actually, you know, everything that was under 2% basically remained under 2%. There's slight, there are slight increases. So Dapper White, for instance, went from 1.6 to 2.8. Another cultivar went from 1.6 to 2.6. But anyway, yeah, we did not see drastic changes after a generation, and we haven't gone to an F3 generation.
For context for the board, he's talking about filial generations. These are subsequent generations. So, but to be clear, you went one further generation.
That's correct.
And in a few cases, at least, some of that second generation did rise from below 2% to above 2% in a single generation.
Yes. So when we collected, we had progeny that were collected as open pollinated seed from a cultivar. And then we evaluated that next generation. And yes, some of them did rise above 2%. I will say marginally, but yes.
Well, but if 2% is the number, right? If that's the line. So in those cases, would those be cultivars that you would still propose as an exception, or would that you know, if you were to see under the system you're proposing to be the new standard, would a rise above 2% in that second generation, you know, take it out of the pool for nomination as an accepted cultivar or not?
No. So I'm looking at, you know, a good example here is Purple Haze has a relative fecundity of 0%. It literally like rounds to 0. In its next generation, it was a 2.3. So those, and you know, again, when we did some studies, so these germination numbers that we collected, this again, we're taking these capsules before they shed, bringing them into a greenhouse, drying them, and then sowing them in peat-based media under the very best conditions. We tried to do some field studies to replicate what this might look like under more natural settings. And we were never able to get anything to germinate over the 3 years that we attempted this. So I really think the danger is very nominal. You can make me eat crow later if I am proved wrong, but I have good confidence. And actually, I'm not really going on my own. I'm really going by, when you're working with John Lambrinos as a landscape ecologist and Tom Kay. I kind of defer to them on this topic, and they both seem to have good confidence in what we've seen. I'll be quiet. I think Mark has his hand raised.
I have a question at some point here when Troy, when it's appropriate.
Mark Porter's had his hand up for some time. Maybe we can go to Mark and then to the other Mark.
As long as we have time, I would defer to Mr. Krautman if
Go
time
ahead, Mark
is
Porter.
of the essence. Okay, well, thank you. So I'm trying to wrap my head around what you're talking about here in terms of your reference to biocontrols as a metric, I believe, for a substantive seed reduction that would limit the spread or fecundity of a plant and environment. And so I'm just trying to read the article a little bit while we're talking, and I see life history is really important, but also the level of disturbance at the site. I think when I think about biocontrol in a classical sense, we often have multiple species of biocontrol agents at a time, and they have multiple ways of impacting a plant, not simply, usually anyway, just in seed production. And then the outcome of that is really dynamic depending on the environment, the background vegetation, the species involved. So I'm curious if you could just clarify that bridge and connection and what you guys are thinking and about that. It seems like a big jump from something that makes seeds not viable to basically a predator, if you will, or some kind of plant that's having organism that's having multiple potential detriments to a species. Thanks.
Hey, listen, team, I'm going to jump in here. You guys are getting way off into the literal weeds here, way outside the scope of board members. And this is something that I really think you guys need to have conversations about on a technical level, probably not something that should be in a public meeting. So I don't see an action item here. And it wasn't prepared properly for this board. I'd like to see you move it off of here and move it to a place where you have something you can bring to us.
Are you asking me to leave? Because I'm
No, I'm
fine
not.
leaving.
I just don't think that this technical conversation you guys are having belongs in a public meeting in front of a board.
Okie doke.
It gets to my question, actually,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair. If I might just interject here. As a nursery rep, I guess you'd call me, I have maybe I've been out of the loop on some of these discussions, but I think we need to jump back to a more high-level conversation about the strategic decision, if there's been one made, on the fertility of these cultivars, and if in fact there's been a decision in the lab, Ryan and others who've participated with this at IAE and Corvallis or wherever. I have spoken with Chris actually about this, and it kind of gets down to the idea of these plants being sort of partially pregnant or not. And I'm a little troubled by the fact that the precedent that it may set, if we say, well, 2% is a satisfactory level of fertility for a butterfly bush, or 1%, or what that level is, it begins to open a Pandora's box. In other words, what do we do if we say, okay, well, there are 12 nursery people here in Oregon that want to go back and relook at English ivy because there are these little dwarf cultivars that are variegated. They don't climb up in the top of a fir tree, and so they ought to have exceptions. Is there a level of exception that's permittable for yellow archangel, and other ornamental plants? It just seems to be a dangerous precedent that we set, where we have a plant that we've plainly made illicit to grow. And then we said, oh, well, okay, well, in this case, in that case, then the board has to sit and decide, like Solomon, where would he divide every little baby that comes up in the, I know time is precious. Maybe I've already said what I want to say. I think it's a dangerous precedent to set, but I have not been part of these conversations, so I'm ignorant of the decisions that have already been made.
I don't know if that's for me, or I think maybe Kevin or Chris can, or someone else.
I'm going to chime in here. I agree with Chair Pope. I think this needs to be tabled for now. I think this is a large discussion that needs more internal conversation before we're bringing it to the board for any kind of determination or support. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
Well, I'm going to, I see Troy's got his hand up, Kevin's got his hand up. Mark Krautman, good to see you. Mark Porter, I would love to have a discussion with you in a a venue that's more appropriate. And Chair Pope, you can please ask if folks in the future are being asked. You said that I prepared stuff improperly. Give some guidance on how it should be properly prepared, because I brought materials, I brought some links, and I did what I thought was best. So my email was in the chat, and folks feel free to reach out to me.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, Chair Pope, I understand that this technical conversation is extremely technical, right? I think initially certainly I anticipated that there was going to be some sort of ask to request new cultivar exceptions, and maybe even request that existing cultivar exceptions would be revoked. And because of that, it's very important to understand the technical things behind that, and the implications of that, and how the conclusions are arrived at that led, in this case, Dr. Contreras and his group to say that a certain cultivar is worthy of being accepted and that it meets a standard. And so we tried to make sure he provided the journal articles that support the protocols that he's come up with. Those should have been in board packets. It is a very technical conversation, but that kind of context and that understanding of that technical process is important when it comes to making a decision of whether we're going to allow something or not. So would be happy to meet with you again outside of this meeting to talk about, a preferred structure for when we do need to get into some conversations that are technical on how we might best frame those for the board. Because there is some pretty sciencey stuff behind a lot of what we do in this, in this arena. So Ryan, I really appreciate the time today, and I'll follow up with you,
Thanks.
offline and move forward.
And to Troy's point, it's my misunderstanding on the process. I got clarification from some folks from ODA, and anyway, I do appreciate the time. And again, reach out. Always open to discussion and learning more. And again, Mark Porter, I look forward to chatting about this. Y'all take care. Have a good day.
Thanks, Ryan.
Okay, I'm going to stop us right here, and we were scheduled to take a break at 10:45, but I will say we'll stop here and reconvene back here at 11:10. Okay, so we are recessed till 11:10. Okay, Tristan, are you ready to start our recording again? Can you hear me?
There. Yes,
Okay. Are we ready to be on the record?
we are. Do we have enough of the board back? We're good?
I don't know, but I said 11:10, so
Okay, we're
that's where
good.
we are.
Okay, can you see my main screen?
Yes.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our 2026 grant review meeting and board meeting. I'm excited to bring some great updates and reminders to everybody today. And excited with the quality of grants that we got this time. So I am excited to get going here. Let's get moving. Today I'm going to talk about I also want to touch on a little bit of the Invasive Species Council education grants that we funded. Several of our staff did talk about those and their updates. And so I want to just highlight a few projects this morning. Going to touch on a couple grant reminders. Talk about a little bit of the history of our funding. With Wes being new to our board, I think it's important for him to have just a little perspective when we have these type of discussions that we're having on funding. As well as I'm going to give a quick summary of our proposed grant request. And we're going to throw in an additional county grant fund request to the board in Troy's update and have some time for questions. And when I'm full screen, I can't see you guys. So if someone has a question along the way, you're welcome to unmute and ask a question if you want any clarification. First of all, we've got quite a good handful of new grantee and project managers around the state this cycle. So I just wanted to kind of give a couple general reminders as we're getting ready to go into new agreements. If you have any outstanding OWEB reporting, including our state weed board grants, we will not be able to move forward with any new grant agreements. Those grant outstanding reporting needs to be updated and cleared in August before any new agreements can be issued. So that's an important clarification for anybody that's new, or a great general reminder for those that are outstanding. Another thing is with the changes in OWEB, just a reminder that all reporting time extension payments need to be done using the Augmas dashboard. If you send me your receipts and expense tracking, it's great. I can proof it, but it needs to be entered into the dashboard. I cannot enter those in for you. And if there's also changes, I know that we have a number of project managers where they're in a new role, or you are making a budget change. There needs to be a change to the scope. Please notify me of those, because there needs to be changes to the agreement and with process if there's new point of contacts on any open state weed board grants, because that will affect where notifications are going, if there's an address change and whatnot electronically. So let's make sure that we keep our records, your records, current with me and with OWEB, so that doesn't interfere with any payments or notifications getting sent out. Last thing on reminders for the 25 grants that we have open and rolling. The last day for expenditures is April 30th. So if you're looking at right now, the weather's great. Things are probably, some people are already getting out, getting work done for early spring. But if we start getting hit with snow or other delays, bad weather, contractor availability being stopped or delayed, and you need a time extension, please get that in, reach out to me so that we can get those done in a timely fashion if time extensions are needed. So please pay attention to those deadlines. And also there's going to be a training in March, early March, for all new grantees and even current grantees to talk about what's next after you get a grant, and also go through some good reminders for anybody that has an open grant. I also want to highlight some of our Invasive Species Council awards that were given out this last year. Wes is new. We had a new offering for the state. I was lucky to be able, I volunteered, I'm getting paid, but I did volunteer, I did want to do it, was to oversee our Oregon Invasive Species outreach grants. We end up getting over $700,000 in requests for just $170,000. I mean, that is just amazing. And so with that though, I was excited that we had, of those, there were 10 projects funded, and of those 10, 7 of them were for some of our noxious weed cooperators. And which means that there's additional noxious weed education outreach going around the state in those areas because of the additional funds. Those funded things like we had a couple different trailers that were purchased for outreach events. We have lots of different trifolds, web design. We also had boot brush stations going up in a couple of areas. And one of the cool exhibits that was actually done is at the High Desert Museum. They did a whole display on Soil Alive in both English and in Spanish. And it's about protecting our natural resources from invasive pests and noxious weeds. And so it is a cool display in English and in Spanish. If anybody wants to check it out, it's live now, and it'll be there through the end of spring break. And so that's a fun thing to go check out. And so just congratulations to everybody that's doing that extra work of our grantees. It's a fun new grant cycle. We don't have it again, it doesn't look like, but there is possibility that I hear rumblings that it's back in to possibly get funded again. So we'll see, because it's a great offering and a lot more flexible funding. A little history for those that are new to our program, especially with Stephanie touching on a lot of this earlier. Our State Weed Board grant program actually got started in like 1999, 2001 biennium. And back then, all the budget, all the paperwork, all of that was housed within ODA. In 76, when, just like what Stephanie had referenced earlier, that passage of 76 moved all the lottery fund dollars under one entity, which was OWEB. So it took our money that was once under the ODA direct budget into and started our partnership with OWEB. So now OWEB, even though we have the technical oversight, you as a board are the ones that approve the grants, and it's us as regional and state people that have the expertise that work with our grantees. It's still OWEB that has the final approval on any payments and reporting that gets processed. But now also our grantees are having to meet the standards of both our grants and OWEB. So I know that's where some that are have been around a while still get a little frustrated, but I think in the long run, it is a great new thing because it's a lot easier to track grants reporting when everything's all electronic in their larger scale system. Moving on to county grants. We touched on this a little bit last time when we requested that there was a change to the way our county offering was offered. We were seeing a lot of A-listed species historically in our county pool, which really kind of defeated some of our counties that were being penalized for not having high state listed weeds in their area. And that's a good thing if we don't have A-listed species in all of our counties. That should be a thing that we really strive for. But with that change, we realized we needed to make the change to help our counties that don't have the A-listed species, but could be an A-listed species in their county, still be competitive for that funding, because they weren't competing well. If we had a large pool and a regular pool with things that were mixed with A's and higher priority projects, it was really hard to make sure that we were getting a good disbursement of funding for some of those areas that still had their priorities that needed to be addressed. So with this last county change, it basically, nothing else in it changed. For those that are new that are joining now, our county grant program is the offering that's open at the same time as our regular pool. But the difference is you have to be the county weed lead to apply for this offering. So that could be a county program, an SWCD, CWMA to qualify for this designated pot of money. This money was started at like $500,000, and I believe it's been about 10 years ago that we set aside the specific money in our state weed board funds just for the counties, and there has not been an increase in that funding. So that'll lead to more conversations here in a few minutes. So this exciting new offering that changed took our A's, made anybody that had an A-listed weed apply under our regular offering pool. So with that change, what did we see? We saw an increase in grants coming in our county pool. We had 18 county grants requesting over $633,498. And they had to meet all the, to be a county entity. It gave them a little bit more flexibility to put in projects that were really priorities to the counties. Some were new innovative projects. Some projects were their priorities. And that's what, in which we also, with that, we recently went through the whole process as our ODA Noxious Weed program this last year, and we updated the statewide management plans for our BT listed species. So with that consideration, it gave guidance to us as regional staff and reviewers to make sure that we were funding those county projects, that they were meeting not only they were a priority for the county, but a priority at its statewide and regional levels. So that was a good consideration and kind of helped with the recommendations that you guys will see before you as a board, that helped us and guidance with that piece of it. But it also showed several things as we were going through the county grants. It showed that we have multiple partners that really do need updated county weed lists. There's some counties that don't even have a weed list. So what's going to happen next is that we would like to work with we want to work with our county partners. We want to help them give guidance in possibly where needed for forming their own county weed list. Some don't have an active or a weed district. Some of our areas don't even have an active weed board or a board. So some of the first steps will be maybe, many cases our regional staff are already going to some of these county meetings. But the next step, I think we're going to try to get a survey put together with our grantees to just get a gauge on what's happening around the state. Do they have an active county weed board or district? When was the last time they looked at their list? And provide some examples or documents to assist county partners in forming some of those updated materials. We've got some great active counties around our state, and we would just like to help leverage or build some of that up with some of our other counties that do need more assistance. And so that's kind of what this county offering also showed, is that some were great and could highlight that they were on their county A list or their EDRR list, while others, they were a local priority, but that's but that's what it was. And so we want to help them leverage and get more, just get more active weed boards and weed districts in their areas. So with that, what we are going to be requesting later is that this biennium, you also heard Stephanie say that we did get an increase this last biennium for the additional $250,000, which was exciting. Always wish it was more, but it was exciting that we did see an increase. But what Troy's going to talk about more in his section is that there's going to be a recommendation at the end of the grant award to request the board consider moving those additional funds for this biennium into the county grant program for this biennium to help leverage some of those additional dollars to encourage counties to get more involved, for some of them need that. Some of them are trying to form weed districts. Some of our cooperators are trying to get appointed as a designated weed entity. So I think some of this additional funding might be a great carrot to be able to help some of our other weed programs around the state. It's exciting. We had one of our highest requests ever this last cycle. We had a total of 62 grants come in the cycle, requesting over $2.4 million in funding. That's our highest request to date. We had 18 county grants requesting over the $633,000, and we had $500,000 for the biennium to spend. We had 44 regular grants come in requesting over 1.8 million in funding, and we have $3 million a biennium to award in that pool. So we had some hard decisions to make on this funding cycle. What did we see? That in this 26 grant applications, we actually saw new cooperators reach out for the first time. We had a handful of new grantees that have not submitted a grant application before. They're a new organization.
Go up to a little bit beyond these trees. Yeah, just beyond. Yeah.
Oh, could someone mute? Thank you. And we also saw cooperators that have previously requested funding, but haven't come back to us in multiple years that have either lost money for funding at a local or federal level with all the cuts that have been going on, that are now coming back to us looking for funding. So overall, those are some of the big factors. And overall, some of the projects, we did see an increase in some of them. It's costing more to do work, travel, the gas prices have gone up, contractor cost. So we have all those factors included in our considerations. So with time for our 26 review here, we have put in a lot of our staff, and I want to thank everybody that applied. I know that even just getting a grant submitted, there's a lot of work that goes into it. There's also a lot of staff time for myself and our regional staff. Even Troy gets involved reviewing these applications, working with our grantees to submit strong projects. And the quality of grants that we received this time was exceptional. And so kudos to everyone. As we get into this process, I want people to be proud of what they submitted and what's in this good cycle that is going before the board today. This is kind of a quick little map of where our requests came in around the state. We have Central West having a huge chunk. But we're kind of evenly dispersed around the state in funds. And then our little sliver here is the multi-funded projects that would be like Portland State. That would take that sliver if you've got multiple counties being represented. And here's what was requested here on the left. And here is what our award recommendation is that will be going forward to the board today. And so we will move forward, and the board will soon have the task of listening through the projects that were submitted before you. This is our state weed board grant recommendation that will be getting reviewed, that we would like to request $448,623 to be funded in county grants, and the 1.292455 being recommended for funding in our regular pool. And then here's just kind of an overview of what came in, what's being recommended for funding. That would fund 45 grants, and will still leave us a good chunk for next cycle because we need to fund 2 grant cycles with that remaining money. And again, thank everybody that submitted applications and to our board. I also want to highlight this one picture with our lottery video. I know we've talked about this like at last December meeting, and we've talked about this a couple times. We had one of our state weed board, actually 3 of the projects I submitted for our work on the Willamette was selected for highlight by the Oregon Lottery. I know that's video's been shared multiple times, and coming up this winter, they're even going to use some of our clips in some of their lottery ads. So as soon as I see those come out, I will make sure I share those with everybody on our listservs and with the board. But I just want to thank everybody for your time. I know our board members, it's a lot. And I thank everybody for their time. If anybody has questions along the way, let me know. This little guy happens to be one of my grandsons, who's definitely good about pulling weeds. Guy has the little root there now. So train them when they're young. But thank you all for your time. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, Troy, and I don't know if we're going to start with, he'll pick up and start going through the grant list.
Thanks, Tristan. I believe, unless I missed it when we first opened, I believe Chair Pope will need to do the conflict of interest statement, or did I miss
Yes,
that?
actually, sorry. Yes, that is correct. Craig, did you get that?
Trying to make this computer work today. It's been very frustrating. Yes, I do have it. Thank you.
Sorry.
And,
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to jump right into reading that.
Can you stop your screen share, Tristan, please?
Okay, so this is our potential conflict of interest statement that we do every season. And so I'll start. As chairman of the Oregon State Weed Board, I make the following statement on behalf of the entire board. All members of the board agree if there is an item the board is taking action on, which is a potential conflict of interest to that member, such member will abstain from voting on such action. When a member believes there is a potential conflict of interest, said member shall indicate to the chair and will be officially recorded in the minutes. State law defines potential conflict of interest as any means of action or any decision or recommendation by a person acting in a capacity as a public official, the effect of which could be to the private pecuniary benefit or detriment of the person or the person's relative, or a business with which the person or person's relative is associated. In addition, to ensure that there is equal opportunity to all grant applicants, the Oregon State Weed Board has adopted the following guidelines. During grant award discussion, the public present at the meeting shall not address the board unless specifically asked for input, comment, or clarification on a particular item. ODA staff is present to provide input to the board on information that was used in making a particular grant recommendation. The discussion between staff and the board is intended to assist the board in making an informed decision to fund or not fund a particular grant. The board expects that the applicants present will refrain from lobbying for grants during breaks and other interactions with members of the board. The intent of these guidelines is to help ensure that one applicant does not have an advantage over another because they are present at the meeting to lobby for their grant or grants. This statement is read and entered into the minutes of the Oregon State Weed Board on February 12, 2026 at 11:34 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, Troy.
Yeah, before I get started, I didn't know if you wanted to provide any guidance to members of the board on any questions they may have about a particular project or about how we came to our recommendation. If you want them to raise those questions as we go through, or to save them for the end and then reference them at the end before the vote.
I would prefer that we do them as we make presentation, because they're usually not, I know that disrupts the flow, but there's a lot of detail perhaps that'll be hard for members to remember. We've had a pretty good process in the past where you are able to get right through them. So I think for those few questions, I think it's appropriate to take them as they come.
I like that approach. I'd ask Tristan and Grace if you could keep an eye out for hand raisings. Ask the board to, if you can use your hand raised, great. If you're on a phone or a different device where you can't access that feature, just holler and we'll stop and talk to you. So Tristan.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that I know this is like Wes's first time going through these. If at any time you do want, as he's going through a grant and you want something shared, a map, photos, more details, I can pull up the grant and get that information to share with the board as we're going through. And regional staff are here for resource as well.
Yep. As Craig mentioned, we have kind of streamlined this to be it starts to move pretty quickly, and I'll start running through them rather quickly, especially if there's no questions. That is not to, minimize the importance of any of them or discourage any sort of discussion. We just have streamlined it to be very efficient. So please don't feel like you can't stop the flow. With that, I will get started. And for the record, my name is Troy Abercrombie. I am the program manager here at the ODA Noxious Weed Control Program. And I will share my screen and get into the slideshow. Do you see just the slide, or do you see the presenter view? Okay.
I see the slide.
Great. All right. So as Tristan mentioned, our highest request to date, well over our biennial allotment for county grants, and a large ask on the regular weed side. I think one thing that's important to note here, when compared to the first year of our last biennial cycle, there was actually a $200,000 decrease in requests on the regular weed grant side, while we had a huge increase in requests for counties. And that tells me that's really where a lot of help is needed. It tells me that the decisions that we made to unmarry the A list, I think were a good one, and I think helps us paint a clearer picture now on what's needed and where. So as Tristan mentioned, there will be a request to the board at the end of this to allow for a specific allocation of the increased funding that we got this year to the county grant side to accommodate the extreme need on that side. But with that, I will get started, and we will start with those county grants. The first grant comes from Baker County. It's the Powder River Perennial Pepperweed and Other Priority Noxious Weeds 2026. Amount requested was $39,572. Total project cost $57,627 to address BT rated perennial pepperweed, Dyer's Woad, yellow flag iris, and Russian knapweed. Staff recommendation was to fund this in full in the amount of $39,572. Next one, also out of Baker County. Baker County Leafy Spurge and Other Priority Noxious Weed Control. Requested amount $39,833. Total project cost of $71,385 to address B&T rated leafy spurge, rush skeleton weed, and B-listed diffuse and spotted knapweed and musk thistle. Recommendation of the staff to fund this in full, $39,833. Also out of Baker County, Upper Burnt River Noxious Weed Control. Amount requested $24,867 on a total project cost of $44,680. BT rated perennial pepperweed, Dyer's Woad, Russian and spotted knapweed, white top, as well as Medusa head, Mediterranean sage, musk and Scotch thistles, and sulfur cinquefoil. Recommendation of the staff was to do not fund. Can we mute that window, please? Thank you. Next one, Clackamas
Hey,
soil.
Troy,
Yes, sir.
on those that are do not fund, can you just give us a quick snapshot of the reasons for that recommendation as you go along?
Yeah, and I may need to lean on Tristan for some of the notes. In most cases, though, it was just a matter of resource allocation, and trying to make sure, especially in this case, which is an issue we'll want to talk about, where we received multiple county grant proposals from a single entity, where we then had to kind of go in and prioritize by that smaller scale area on which of the multiple projects rise to the highest priority. And so in most cases, it was just an exercise in trying to spread the resources out amongst as many counties as possible while balancing the priorities within those projects.
That was a
But
good
yeah.
explanation.
Good point of order, though. So this next one, Clackamas Soil and Water Conservation District. It's the County Weed Board grant for 2026. Requested amount $50,010 on a total project cost of $119,504 for B&T rated garlic mustard and gorse, and then Italian thistle and puncture vine. Recommendation of the staff here was a partial fund in the amount of $30,000. Columbia County, Partnerships and Priorities Phase 2, amount requested $47,400, total project cost of $79,517 for B&T rated garlic mustard and B rated yellow archangel, policeman's helmet, and spurge laurel. Recommendation, fund in full, $47,400. Next one from Crook County. Crook County's most wanted, high priority EDRR, a $32,786 request on a total project cost of $50,256 for purple loosestrife, jointed goatgrass, yellow flag Irish, tansy ragwort, Mediterranean sage, musk thistle, and yellow star thistle. Recommendation of the staff to fund this project in full, $32,786. Next one comes out of Curry County. Yellow flag iris EDRR. Amount requested $10,505. Total project cost of $27,405. A single species project here for yellow flag iris. Recommendation was to do not fund. This one out of Harney County. Princeton skeleton weed expanded project, $24,321 request. Total project cost of $44,934 for B&T rated rush skeleton weed. Recommendation of the staff is to fund this project in full, $24,321. Next one comes from Hood River Soil and Water Conservation District. Hood River County Garlic Mustard and False Brome Abatement Project 2026-2027. Requested amount $55,160. Total project cost of $76,482 for B&T rated garlic mustard, B rated false brome, and the recommendation of the staff is to fund this project in full, $55,160. Jefferson County Public Works, collaborative weed abatement project in the Jefferson County area of the John Day watershed, $42,781. Project amount $118,815. B&T rated rush skeleton weed and perennial pepperweed, as well as B rated Scotch thistle, Russian, diffuse, and spotted knapweeds, as well as hoary cress. Recommendation of the staff is to do not fund. And I guess to Craig's point, I would ask regional staff to be at the ready with your review comments in case there's questions about the recommendation, regardless of which direction that recommendation went.
Troy, this is Wes.
Go ahead, Wes.
I'm kind of with Craig. I would like just a one sentence. We do not fund because one sentence on those do not fund ones. I know you gave us an overview of the generally why you didn't do it, but I still think it'd be good if you just touch on it on each one of these that do not funds. It'd be helpful.
We can definitely do that because my notes aren't prepared in that fashion. It will involve me just kind of farming some of this out in certain cases, at least where.
Okay.
But that's okay because regional staff is here, and that's what they're here for. So, Dan.
Yeah, I could give a quick synopsis of this most current one that we recommended do not fund. So, actually, this one.
Just to clarify, this is Wes. I think a one sentence. I'm not looking for 30 seconds. I'm looking for 5 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, in a nutshell, this one right off the bat, unfortunately, was disqualified. It missed some required documents at the time of grant submission. So I could leave it at that if you'd like.
Good enough.
Yeah, there are a few in here that are because of that. They were missing a required document. Or in the case of the next one, I can explain this one as well. Lake County Cooperative Weed Management Area, 2026 Lake County EDRR projects, $31,763 request, a total project cost of $243,602. B&T rated leafy spurge, and then a host of bee species, pheasant-eye, musk and Scotch thistles, Dalmatian toadflax, spotted and diffuse knapweed, and purple loosestrife. The Lake County submission is not being recommended for funding due to multiple things related to OWEB reporting as well as drawdowns. Lake County is doing a great job and doing great work. However, they have still not drawn down funds from previous grant cycles. And so for us, we were not willing to commit more money when there are already unspent funds on other projects and lock up that money that could be allocated elsewhere. So that's why we recommended to do not fund this project. Malheur Watershed Council, big picture from the sky, requested amount $66,899, project amount $114,972, B&T rated leafy spurge, rush skeleton weed, as well as B rated spotted and diffuse knapweeds. Recommendation of the staff, $51,899. Another case here of trying to balance resource allocation and available funding to in a way that the project could still be viable, but with limited resources, not a full fund. Malheur Watershed Council requested amount $25,649. Total project $57,231. B&T rated leafy spurge, B rated med sage, Dalmatian toadflax, spotted knapweed, and white top. Bonnie, maybe one sentence on the grant summary here for the Juntura work.
Basically, the only reason this grant wasn't recommended for funding is we didn't have enough funding. Malheur County has, I think we had 4 grants submitted from them, and on a statewide level, the bee weeds just didn't shake out because we didn't have enough money.
Thank you, Bonnie. Another Malheur Watershed Council, Malheur County A-listers, requested amount $28,032. Project request or project cost $43,736. B&T rated leafy spurge, spotted and diffuse knapweed, and yellow star thistle. Recommendation: fund this project in full, $28,032. Umatilla County Weed Control, 2026 Umatilla County Veg Management Priority Species. Requested amount $29,750. Total project cost $52,475. B&T rated tansy ragwort, meadow hawkweed, as well as B rated Mediterranean sage. Recommendation of the staff to fund this project in full, $29,750. Union County Weed Board, Union County Yellow Star Thistle 2026, project request 14,300. Project, I think we have a typo there. For the total project cost. It was more than 14,000. And B-rated Yellow Star Thistle, recommendation, do not fund. Shonda or Tristan, do you have your review sheet handy for a one sentence?
Yep, I can jump in here. Great project, great match. Just the B-rated species didn't rank out with the BTs and there wasn't enough money.
Thank you, Shonda. Next one, Wheeler Soil and Water Conservation District. Indeed need to heed pepperweed and skeleton weed. If we had an award for best names, this one gets it. Requested amount $30,418. Total project cost $50,601. For perennial pepperweed and rush skeleton weed, recommendation of the staff to fund this project in full, $30,418. Yamhill Priority Weed Control 2026, requested amount $39,452. Total project cost $67,538. B&T rated garlic mustard, and then B rated Italian thistle, Japanese giant, and Himalayan knotweeds, as well as Tree of Heaven. Recommendation of the staff to fund this project in full, $39,452. And that is the end of the county grants. Any questions from the board on any of the grants themselves or the county grant pool and process in general before we move into the very meaty section of the regular grant pool? I see none. And before I move into this, to kind of echo Shonda, the grant applications and the work that's going on out on the ground, it's so good. People are getting really good at telling the story in their grant applications. The type of work that's happening on the ground due to the qualified folks we have out there, it's really great. We have gotten to a point over the last few years, there's not a single bad grant typically in the pool. And if we had unlimited funding, we would nearly recommend fund in full for every project. So it's a very difficult process that we literally spend hundreds and hundreds of staff hours to deliberate and evaluate and go back and forth and try to make the best decision about where to allocate these resources. So just thanks to everybody for the amazing work you're doing and the amazing projects that you continue to develop and propose and implement. So for anybody that doesn't get funded today, we still want to work with you. We still want to consult. Let's meet up. Let's talk about how to move forward, whether that's to strengthen your application or to find alternative methods to achieve the goals you're trying to achieve. So with that, I will move into the regular grant pool. First one comes from Applegate Partnership. Dyers Wood and Rutch. Not sure what that was supposed to say. Invasive species treatment. 2026. Requested amount $13,535. Project amount $25,277 for BT rated common bug loss and Dyers Woad, B rated Scotch thistle, yellow toadflax, and spotted knapweed. Recommendation of the staff to fund this in full, $13,535. Benton SWCD.
Just to add in there, the title is correct. It's Roosh, and it's a little town in the Applegate Valley.
So I need to take more trips to Southwest Oregon, Carrie.
Come check out the slides.
Yeah. Once again, would remind folks, if you are not speaking, to please mute your microphone. Benton Soil and Water, purge the mustard spurge, EDRR, and community outreach for oblong spurge and garlic mustard. Requested amount $13,009. Total project cost $16,635. A-rated oblong spurge, B and T rated garlic mustard. Fund in full, $13,009. Benton Soil and Water, Mid-Willamette River EDRR Aquatic Weed Management Part 2, requested amount $26,892, project cost of $40,169, A-rated yellow floating heart, B and T rated water primrose, and B rated parrot's feather. Recommendation of the staff to fund in full, $26,892. City of Corvallis, Witham Hill Knockout, requested amount $58,922, project amount $86,442, B-rated false brome, Himalayan blackberry, hawthorn, Scotch broom, and an unlisted species that was part of the project, English holly. This was not funded just due to statewide priorities. All B-rated species that didn't compete well against the rest of the pool. Coast Fork Willamette Watershed Council, Tying the Knot Weed, a proposal for breaking up this toxic relationship. Another one in the running for best names. Requested amount $16,880. Total project cost $28,230 for B-rated Bohemian, Japanese, and giant knotweed. I know there were a couple in here, like the other one that Dan had, that didn't have all their stuff. I don't remember if this one was one of those or if just the B-rated nature. Grant or Beth, if you had any further
This is
insight.
yeah, this is Grant. This one was not one of those, but it was just out competed essentially. Yep.
Yep. Thank you. Federated Tribes of the Siletz Indians, Noxious Weed Project, requested amount $57,183. Total project cost of $82,182. All B-rated species, Armenian blackberry, Scotch broom, common reed, and Canada and bull thistles. Recommendation of the staff was to do not fund. Again, great project, just lower priority species against a big pool of higher priority projects and limited funding. Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, Umatilla River Watershed Weed Control, requested amount $23,700, $67,812 project cost for B&T rated common crepina, as well as some B-rated Japanese knotweed. Recommendation to fund in full, $23,700. Coos Watershed Association, Coos Basin Priority Weed Campaign 2026. Requested amount $39,985. Total project cost $54,781. B&T rated gorse, B-rated spotted knapweed, Japanese knotweed, and yellow flag iris. Recommendation of the staff to partially fund this project in the amount of $20,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie, but this was just a matter of resource allocation, still funding it at a viable level to address the gorse, but deprioritizing some of the B-rated species.
BT work rose to the top with this one, and unfortunately, we couldn't fund the whole thing because of lower B weed. If we had more money, we would have funded in full.
Yep. Thank you. Coos Watershed Association, Coos County EDRR Strike Team 2026, requested amount $60,961. Total project cost $81,209 for B&T rated gorse, and then B-rated bitty bitty, Japanese giant and Himalayan knotweed, yellow flag iris, Spanish heath, jubata grass, milk thistle, and Italian thistle. Recommendation to fund in full, $60,961. Tristan, do we have a duplicate? It looks like we have duplicate grant numbers here, but maybe some of the information was supposed to be different. Tristan, are you there?
Yes, hold on 1 second. I'm just verifying 609. The amount is correct. Did I not change the image? Let me look. They're different species.
Yeah, with the exact same requested dollar amount?
60, 90, 26 was a different amount. What is that? 27? Is our 227 slides?
Well, there is, but they're completely different. Sorry, let me go back.
Sorry for just a 27 request is correct. It's a 60,961. Oh, did I do 2 slides for them? Oh,
Well,
whoops.
I suspect what happened is last year's slide was also included, or it was modified.
I just want to make sure we're not missing one.
The only difference is the species covered, and in the board packets, you'll see all the scope of species that are covered, but the dollar amount remains the same.
Okay, I just want to make sure we didn't miss one. So let's
No. Sorry. Somehow there was an error in that one. Yes.
Okay, so we will move on to number 28. Crooked River Weed Management Area, Upper Crooked River Priority Noxious Weeds. Requested amount $25,116. Total project request $29,850. A-rated African rue, and then B-rated musk thistle, Mediterranean sage, Russian knapweed, yellow toad flax, and yellow star thistle. Recommendation of the staff to fund in full $25,116. That's the halfway point of the slides for anybody who's keeping track. Over to Curry SWCD. Gorse Wars 2026 still in the mix. Requested amount $37,769. Total project cost $54,064. B&T rated Gorse. Recommendation of the staff, fund in full $37,769. Curry Soil and Water Conservation District, Curry Hit List 2026, Loop in the Lupin. Requested amount $39,521. Project cost $68,667. A-rated Cape Ivy, as well as B-rated Spanish Heath, Himalayan and Japanese knotweed, Chubata grass, bitty bitty, Pinechium, and the recently listed yellow bush lupin. Recommendation of the staff to fund in full $39,521. Douglas Soil and Water Conservation District, Woolly Distaff and Patterson's Curse Control 2026, $79,886 requested. Total project cost $110,726 for A-rated Woolly Distaff Thistle and Patterson's Curse. Recommendation of the staff to fund in full $79,886. Klamath Soil and Water Conservation District, Phase 3, Grizzly Mountain. Requested amount $67,756. Total project cost of $121,946. Priority weeds addressed here, BT rated Dyer's Woad and B rated diffuse knapweed. Recommendation of the staff to fund in full $67,756. Lake County CWMA 2026 Lake County Dyer's Woad Cooperative Control, request of $30,921 on a total project cost of $233,941 for B-rated Dyer's Woad. Recommendation, do not fund. Again, the Lake County decision really just came down to unspent funds from previous grant cycles and our unwillingness, and really my unwillingness, to commit more funds to somewhere that's not spending the funds that have already been committed, especially given the extreme demand on the grant pool this cycle. So recommendation, do not fund, but a great project.
Question on that, Troy.
Yes, sir.
And I suspect this one says do not fund, so it's gonna be the same as the last one you just did. What are those funds that were not used still available, or are you punishing a county for being under budget and not needing all the money they requested.
Nope, they're absolutely still available for them to
Okay.
spend. Those have been awarded to them and they are still available for them to spend. And as they complete the work in the associated reporting, they will be able to draw down those funds. I think they've been able to operate on some alternative funds and you know, it's just a matter of got to spend the money we gave you already before we want to keep committing more and making it unavailable to other folks. So yeah, they are not losing their funds. They're not being punished in that way. Those funds are all still available to them.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Lake County CWMA again, spotted knapweed eradication, $20,889, $69,909 total project cost for B-rated spotted knapweed. Recommendation, do not fund for the same reason as the other Lake County projects. And just for your context, Wes, Bonnie has been in really close contact with the Lake County folks and you know, they're developing plans to not only continue work, but kind of get all of that stuff straightened out. And we're really looking forward to the work that's going on down there and plugging in and, you know, helping them get to the finish line there. And then, you know, at some point, of course, bringing them back into the fold of the state weed board grant program to consider for funding. So they're doing great work down there. Next one, Lincoln County Soil and Water Conservation District. Lincoln County Gorse Control, requested amount $26,714. Total project cost $42,791 for B&T rated gorse. Recommendation of the staff to fund this project in full, $26,714. Malheur Watershed Council, Juntura CWMA Priority Projects 2025, $28,885. Total project cost $87,029 for BT-rated rush skeleton weed, perennial pepperweed, and leafy spurge, and B-rated Mediterranean sage, white top, Scotch thistle, purple loosestrife, and Dalmatian toadflax. Recommendation of the staff, partial fund in the amount of $13,357. Bonnie, a little bit of context, please, on the partial fund recommendation.
A second, there was an error on this one. On the grant number. 24, 26, shoot, there was an error. This is,
Okay.
it's an error, it's the project is correct there, it's an error on the slide.
Okay, what is the error?
For Malheur, it's a fund in full. Let me reduce this. This would be a good place to stop for lunch. I'll correct the slide and then we can start again.
Yeah, I haven't been watching time.
It's
Where are we at?
12:08.
Oh, so we are into the agenda promised lunch. So it is a great time. So we have left off at Lincoln Soil and Water, grant number 39. We will return with a corrected slide deck after lunch and carry forward. Is that okay with you, Craig? I saw a head nod, so thank you, Chair. I saw a couple of people joining. We are breaking for lunch right now, and when will we return, Chair?
30 minutes, so 12:38.
12:38. Thank you.
And we will recess for lunch. Here we are at 12:38. Everyone gather round.